I recognize the Minister of Finance. Bill number 2.
Thank you very
the
much.
Insurance Amendment Bill
Thank you very much.
2022.
Thank you very much.
And you have 45 minutes as the mover of the motion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I beg to move that a bill entitled the Insurance Amendment Bill 2022 be now read a second time. The Insurance Amendment Bill 2022, a bill consisting of only 2 clauses, seeks to extend the reorganization period under Section 281 of the Insurance Act 2018. Now, honorable members will be aware that the new Insurance Act was the subject of deliberation by at least 2 joint select committees and took years in this Parliament to be sorted out. I recall being a member of a joint select committee under former Minister Hawaii, and that went on for years. And then when we came back into government in 2015, and I was given the portfolio of finance, again, we submitted the legislation to a joint select committee, and that too went on for years. But fortunately, at the end of that very extended period, we were able to pass a new Insurance Act 2018 to replace the archaic legislation that existed up to that time. The question of proclamation then followed, and after relevant consultation and so on, the law was proclaimed. And one of the features of the law was the reorganization of companies under Section 281 of the Insurance Act. So, the Insurance Act was passed in this House in February of 2018 and in the Senate in May of 2018. And as I just indicated, after first being introduced in this House in many different forms as early as 2011. So it took 7 years before that bill saw the light of day and found its way into an act. The Insurance Act 2018 is the laborious result of previous Parliament's work, as just indicated, and in fact, my notes are telling me there were 4 joint select committees over numerous parliamentary sessions. The legislation, the draft legislation, also benefited from the findings of the Coleman report into colonial life, consultation with and from a wide cross-section of stakeholders such as the Central Bank, the Securities and Exchange Commission, and of course insurance companies and other related actors within the insurance industry, and coordination and discussion with numerous international entities. The Act was subsequently assented to on June the 8th of 2018 and proclaimed with effect from the 1st of January 2021 through legal notice number 369 of 2021 in full, save and except for sections 184 and 185. Again, after the Act was passed and assented to, there was a significant period to allow consultation between the central bank as the regulator of insurance companies and the players in the marketplace, the insurance companies and so on. And that is why there was this period of time between the assent to the Act and the actual proclamation of the Act. The Insurance Act was then amended by the Insurance Amendment Act of 2020, which was passed in this House on January 31st, 2020, and in the Senate on the 5th of February, 2020. The Insurance Amendment Act 2020 was subsequently assented to on February 18th, 2020, and proclaimed with full effect from January the 1st, 2021 through legal notice number 371 of 2021 in full. It is significant to note for the purpose that we are about that the Insurance Amendment Act 2020 amended. Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker.
You proceed, member. Go ahead.
Well,
Go ahead, honorable member. Proceed.
crosstalk is bothering me. For present purposes, it is significant to note that the Insurance Amendment Act 2020 amended Section 281 of the Insurance Act 2018 by repealing and substituting subsections 1 and 4 and inserting a new subsection 7. The sum total of the amendments to Section 281 of the Act, and as I indicated, what we're about here is to further amend Section 281 of the Insurance Act, provided much needed clarity as to how branches of foreign insurance companies were expected to reorganize their businesses to become compliant under the provisions of the Insurance Act 2018. In particular, the specific requirement under Section 21 to become a local company. Now, that is a feature of the new insurance legislation that foreign insurance companies must incorporate a local company through which their operations would be done. In this regard, Section 281 is an important provision that provides for transition of foreign insurers from where they are now to an acceptable corporate structure in Trinidad and Tobago. It preserves the regulatory framework under the repealed Insurance Act No. 6 of 1980 for a limited period, and the applicability of the provisions on transfer and amalgamation and the facilitation of transfers and undertakings to branches of foreign insurance companies under the Insurance Act 2018. In broad terms, following the advice of the central bank, the reorganization process entails the following, as I indicated just now. The incorporation of a local company by a foreign insurer. And this was felt by all of the market actors and the regulator to be extremely important, that no longer should foreign companies be allowed to do business without having a corporate identity in Trinidad and Tobago. And that has all to do with the questions of liability. It has all to do with questions of assets, questions of responsibility to our citizens, and so on. And B, the application to the central bank for approval of the registration of the local company as an insurer. In this regard, the central bank must ensure all the requirements for the registration of an insurer as laid out in sections 22, 24, and 28 of the Insurance Act 2018 are properly met prior to the issuance of the approval, which includes, among other things, a fully constituted board of directors, the members of which must meet fit and proper requirements, evidence of requisite policies and procedures, a sound business plan with projections and capital adequacy requirements, controlling and significant shareholders, and, if applicable, acquirers who must meet fit and proper requirements. Restructuring of the group where entities are engaged in both financial and non-financial activities, permits for acquirers, significant shareholders, and controlling shareholders as applicable, which must meet fit and proper requirements. After being satisfied that all requirements for registration are met, the central bank is required to consult with the Minister of Finance prior to registration of the local company. Following this, the central bank will issue a certificate of registration. Further, where the local insurer will own subsidiaries or have ownership interests in entities, the approval of the central bank is required. Additionally, the application to the central bank for the approval of a scheme of transfer to facilitate the transfer of all the assets and liabilities of the branch operations into the registered local company. In this context, the central bank must review and assess the scheme, which includes the transfer agreement and the relevant documents, to ensure that policyholders' interests are not prejudiced, subject to the transfer, and that the assets and liabilities transferred into the new local company will not result in the new company being in a lesser or less favorable financial condition than existed in the branch prior to the transfer. Additionally, the transfer of all the assets and liabilities of the foreign insurer to the newly registered local company is to be done by way of a vesting order issued by the Minister of Finance. Further, the application must be made to the Minister of Finance to issue the vesting order to transfer the business to the new company. The newly registered local company can apply to the Minister for a vesting order pursuant to Section 263 of the Insurance Act. The central bank will review the draft of the vesting order prior to the company's submission to the Minister of Finance to ensure that the order is consistent with the scheme of transfer and all the assets, all the liabilities of the branch are being transferred as per the scheme of transfer. Upon the Minister of Finance making of the vesting order, the transfer of the assets and liabilities will be effective on the appointed day specified in the order. Since the Insurance Act 2018 was proclaimed with effect from January 1st, 2020, and Section 281 permits a maximum period of 18 months from the commencement of the Act for the reorganization period, it means that branches of foreign insurance companies that have not yet transitioned, that should be January 1st, 2021, it means that branches of foreign insurance companies that have not yet transitioned to a local company as of June 30th, 2022, run the risk of being in contravention of Section 21, which carries criminal sanctions amounting to a fine of $10 million and imprisonment for 10 years. To give some appreciation as to the magnitude of what may happen if the deadline of June 30th, 2022 is not extended, I can cite the following figures made available from the central bank as of December 2021. Approximately $1.564 billion in gross premiums from these foreign entities, representative of 17% of the total combined sector. Approximately $8.209 billion in assets, representing 22% of the total combined sector. Approximately $5.498 billion in net insurance liabilities, representative of 23% of the total combined sector. So let me just reiterate. These foreign companies are responsible for 17% of premiums, 22% of assets, and 23% of liabilities. The passage of this amendment bill is therefore critical to the stability of the insurance sector in Trinidad and Tobago. Looking now at the bill itself, Clause 1 sets out the short title and is self-explanatory. Clauses 2A and B amend Sections 281(1) and 281(2) of the Insurance Act by extending the reorganization period from June 30th, 2022 to June 30th, 2023, with a proviso that this can also be such later date as may be prescribed by the Minister under Section 281(2)(a). To ensure simplicity in identifying the deadline date set out in Sections 281(1) and 2, I'm advised by the drafts people that the current formula, which required one to compute 18 months from the proclamation dates set out in legal notices, is being replaced in favor of simply identifying the proposed deadline date. This is an improvement. That is to say the new deadline will now be June the 30th, 2023. I'm also advised that the current formula of the draft in the legislation was necessary to compensate for the uncertainty of prospective dates concerning when the Insurance Act 2018 would have been proclaimed. That concern no longer exists. The proclamation has occurred, and as a result, we are able to provide with clarity the deadline date, the new deadline date for the reorganization period. Clause 2C permits the deadline date for the reorganization to be extended by order. I wish to emphasize two important features with respect to 2C. Any consideration for extending the deadline date for reorganization beyond June the 30th, 2023 has to be activated on the recommendation of the regulator, the central bank. This is a formula that has been proposed by the central bank and mirrors the criterion under Section 279 of the Act. In other words, the Minister of Finance will not on his own whimsically seek to extend the deadline date beyond June 2023, but must do so on recommendation of the regulator. Any consideration for extending the deadline date beyond June 30, 2023 is subject to parliamentary scrutiny, as I explained in another matter, because the order must be laid in Parliament and is subject to negative resolution. The central bank has been consulted in relation to these amendments. In fact, it is the central bank that has proposed them. We in finance are in agreement, and the central bank is also in agreement with these amendments. The point I wish to make, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I wish to reiterate that foreign insurance entities currently are responsible for 17% of gross premiums in the sector, 22% of assets in the sector, and 23% of liabilities. They have not been able within the 18-month period to reorganize to the satisfaction of the central bank and the Minister of Finance, and therefore we are seeking an extension to ensure that stability continues in the sector. I beg to move.
Honourable members, I shall now propose the question for debate. The question is that a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Insurance Act 2018 be now read a second time. I recognize the member for point of order. And as first responder, you have 45 minutes.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Allow me to join this debate. The Insurance Amendment Bill 2022. I listened to the Prime Minister, Minister of Finance, in moving these two amendments, basically two amendments. And really, the two amendments it relates to foreign companies, insurance companies, extending their period of reorganizing by a further 18 months, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, when I listened to the Minister of Finance, as he piloted the bill, these two amendments, he gave a history of the Insurance Act 2018, Deputy Speaker. And yes, I agree, it has been long in coming, and I happened to in the last Parliament, happened to sit on that GSC, chaired by the Minister of Finance at the time. I myself, member for Point de Pierre, I think the member for San Fernando West was part of that GSC. I think the member for Laventille West was also part of that GSC. The former member for Tabaquit, Dr. Suraj Ramachan, was part of that GSC and represented the lower house along with the Senate of both the government, opposition, and independent. And we took basically a year to bring the report to Parliament to be laid in Parliament. I think we started in the month of February in 2017, and we ended The first debate was in 2018, February, Deputy Speaker, if my memory serves me right. But during that period of 1 year of the report, going through the bill, clause by clause, led by the chairman and the Minister of Finance, we had some robust discussions, healthy discussions. It's there in the Hansard when the minister piloted the act. We had some healthy discussions. And one of the areas that we had some healthy discussions in was this same area with foreign companies doing business, foreign insurance companies doing business in Trinidad, Deputy Speaker. And if my memory serves me correct, we were really trying to get the foreign companies to be incorporated at the shortest time period to get their business within the local model with the other local insurers, Deputy Speaker. And if my memory was correct, again, the chairman, Minister of Finance, was very vociferous in that area, Deputy Speaker. One of the things I want to put on the Hansard here this afternoon, Deputy Speaker, and the Minister of Finance didn't do it, is that sometimes the opposition is given the short end of the stick when it comes to legislation, Deputy Speaker. And I want to put it on the record that when that bill that was passed, the report was passed in 2018, Deputy Speaker, in both houses, when we submitted that report to the lower house, we submitted it with consensus. There was no minority report. And when we voted, and that was a 3/5 bill, Deputy Speaker, the opposition voted with the government for this bill, this piece of legislation, Deputy Speaker. So when the government says that the opposition does not support legislation, I want to say that the opposition support good pieces of legislation, Deputy Speaker. And that insurance bill was a good piece of legislation. So we supported it, and it was a 3/5 bill in both areas. We gave no trouble, according to the Minister of Finance in the Hansard. It was pure consensus, and Laventille West was very calm and engaging in that GSC report, in that GSC committee, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, when we come to these amendments now, the act was proclaimed in January 1st, 2020, or 2021, sorry. And it gave 18 months to the foreign insurers to be reorganized and get in line and be incorporated in Trinidad and Tobago, Deputy Speaker. I listened to the Minister of Finance. He talked about the value of the foreign companies within our local insurance industry. 17% of premiums in that sector, 22% of assets, 23% of liabilities, Deputy Speaker. It's very sizable, very sizable. And I thought I would have heard from the Minister of Finance, given that he was one of the strong proponents in that GSC committee for foreign companies to get reorganize and get in line, Deputy Speaker. I thought the Minister of Finance would have listed those foreign companies that are outstanding, Deputy Speaker, and he did not do that. So we asked the question, the opposition is asking the question, which one of these foreign local insurance companies have not been doing their business and getting reorganized to meet that 18-month deadline that expires at the end of this June 2022, and they are now asking for a further 12-month extension, Deputy Speaker. The country would like to know, because the opposition would like to know, who are those foreign insurance companies that are left wanting, Deputy Speaker. Because you see, Deputy Speaker, one of the importance of this Insurance Act was to avoid another CLICO debacle happening, Deputy Speaker. And that was the strength of this Insurance Act when we passed the legislation. And also a Hindu Credit Union issue, Deputy Speaker. And to just come, and the Minister of Finance came this afternoon and just quoted the value of the foreign companies in the sector. But if there are 5 or 6 players of foreign companies, is it all 5 that are outstanding? Is it all 5 that still has to be reorganized? Or is it one Deputy Speaker, that is located around the Savannah, Deputy Speaker, that is outstanding. So we ask that question because the country wants to know, because of the importance of this bill. Deputy Speaker, the concern that we have with the extension is that we are giving them a further 12 months, and then they can be extended again via negative resolution, Deputy Speaker. So that the 12 months that will expire next year, the 30th of June 2023, but again, without having to come to Parliament under the recommendation of Central Bank, the regulator, they can do an order and lay a negative resolution in Parliament. And it depends on the citing of the opposition to see if they are being extended again, Deputy Speaker. And I'm asking the question, if you are giving them a further 12 months, that should be a one-off situation, and if they have to get a further extension, they should come back to Parliament looking for affirmative resolution, Deputy Speaker, because the foreign companies, as the value of the foreign companies in this sector is a great amount, so that we just can't. We don't feel that it should be under a negative resolution, because the Minister of Finance should not allow the central bank, by recommendation, seek another extension to these foreign companies, Deputy Speaker. Because you see, these foreign companies, while they seek an extension, and while they seek an extension, some of the issues there, Deputy Speaker, that these foreign companies do not fall under this present act. They fall outside of it, and they fall under the old act, Deputy Speaker. So that the extended period, the foreign insurance companies which are not registered would not be exposed to the stringent requirements under the 2018 Act, including the punishments of fines and imprisonment for failure to comply with the requirements of the 2018 Act. And it puts our local insurance companies at a disadvantage, because we are protecting these foreign players in our insurance industry, Deputy Speaker, and that doesn't augur well for our local industry, right? So that we need, if the Parliament wants today, the government wants to give a further 12 months, we might agree with that, but we feel that it should be affirmative resolution the next time around for an extension, Deputy Speaker. So we ask the Minister of Finance to maybe consider that as an amendment this afternoon. Deputy Speaker, much has been said. We understand the importance of this insurance, these insurance amendments. The foreign companies are big players in the local market. But we ask, who are these local players that still have to be reorganized? Because these foreign companies had enough time, Deputy Speaker, enough time to put their house in order. Because if the local companies can do it, so can these foreign companies. And we should not be protecting these foreign companies at the expense of our local companies, Deputy Speaker. Why must our local companies be liable to pay up to millions of dollars in fines, and their directors, officers, and employees be exposed to imprisonment on a foreign insurance company as a result of this extension, which could further be extended in perpetuity, be given a free rein, because they can be extended again, Deputy Speaker, by negative resolution? Why is the government going out of its way to grant this benefit to the foreign insurance companies? I ask that question again. Why are we protecting these foreign insurance companies? Similarly, Deputy Speaker, when the government via the Central Bank of Trinidad and Tobago is seeking to sell two insurance portfolios, Colonial Life and British BAT, although the bidding requirements provided the acquirer must be incorporated, registered as an insurance company by Central Bank, the Central Bank chose and the Ministry of Finance approved the selection of Sagicor, which neither is incorporated or registered in Trinidad and Tobago. So I am asking, is this extension of time to protect Sagicor, Deputy Speaker? That is the question I'm asking here. The opposition is asking that, Deputy Speaker. So, Deputy Speaker, as I wrap up, because I think I have covered what I wanted to say, Deputy Speaker, And it's about why should we be protecting the foreign companies when we went through the GSC committee and we produced a report without a minority report. The opposition voted for this piece of legislation, a 3/5 piece of legislation with the government. It was a robust piece of legislation to assist the insurance industry, to assist our local insurers. We should not be protecting these foreign companies. We have given them a time period to get their house in order, Deputy Speaker. They are now giving them a further 12 months, and we should not be allowing them any further extension of time by way of negative resolution, Deputy Speaker. With those few words, I thank you.
I recognize the member for San Fernando West. Member, you have 30 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I am very pleased to join in supporting the Honourable Minister of Finance in a critical, well-thought-out, well-justified and proportionate amendment to the laws of Trinidad and Tobago. And permit me, in rejecting entirely the submissions coming from the Honourable Member for Pointe-a-Pierre, to say that the Honourable Member's submission that this is an amendment designed to protect and to give favor to foreign insurance companies is nothing short of intellectually ludicrous, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And I'll tell you why I say that in such a bold fashion. Mr. Deputy Speaker, first of all, the bill before us is a simple majority piece of law. It is a simple majority piece of law because we do not infringe upon constitutional matters. The Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago prohibits a breach of fundamental rights, including the right to equality. And it would be an entirely inappropriate move for the Honourable Minister of Finance to come here to pilot legislation which could somehow be viewed to be discriminatory. And therefore I want to point out that the amendments before us now, Mr. Vice President, are proposed on a simple majority basis for good reason. Mr. Deputy Speaker, it is important to also recognize that the law before us is one which comes from the Central Bank of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, and the Central Bank's point of contact is in fact the inspector under the legislation. Mr. Vice President, forgive me, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I say this because the Central Bank, which has the locus for the new insurance legislation and also the supervision of the old Insurance Act, because there's a transition between the old 1980 Act and the new legislation, the Central Bank did not approach the Law Revision Committee or the Legislative Review Committee or the Cabinet or the Minister of Finance without having performed the functions required of the Central Bank in ensuring that the legislation proposed, as the amendment does today, was one that was bona fide, proportionate, and measured. So therefore, the member for Pointe-a-Pierre, in making the submission that this law is designed to protect foreign entities, is casting a long, dark shadow on the very hard and transparent enterprise of the Central Bank of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. And I wish to reject that on behalf of all of the members of the Central Bank who take the role of supervision of insurance companies with very serious measure, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, we're proposing an amendment to Section 281 of the Insurance Act. What is 281? Section 280 of the Parent Act says that the Insurance Act is to be repealed. Section 281 says, notwithstanding Section 280, the former Act, which is the 1980 Act, save for Sections 84 to 87 of that Act, and the regulations made under that Act, shall apply to a foreign insurer for a period of 18 months. We propose to amend the 18-month reference here so that we're moving it from June 30th, 2022, which is from the date of assent. If you add 18 months, the 18 months expires in June, this month, the 30th of June. We propose to move that. But if you were to accept what the member for Pointe-a-Pierre has said, it would be to ignore the express provisions of the law. And Section 281 is absolutely clear that we are preserving Sections 84 to 87 of the old Act. Let me just put it into those words. And what do those sections say? Transfer and amalgamation. 84. Condition precedent to transfer or amalgamation of insurance business. 85, scheme to set out terms of agreement or deed. 86, submission, confirmation, and effect of schemes. 87, return to be made in the case of transfer or amalgamation. And the regulations, which are specifically preserved, still operate. So let's apply that to what the extension permits, because the extension that we're giving is an extension of the transitional provisions. Put quite simply, the existing law, that is the 1980 Insurance Act, as it relates to sections 84 to 87 and the regulations, still apply. But Mr. Deputy Speaker, the law itself, the Insurance Act itself, the new Insurance Act, has a very important provision which is also required to be put on the record. And I want to refer you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to Section 10 of the Insurance Act. That is the Insurance Act, Chapter 8401, the one that has been amended, the one that has been proclaimed nearly 18 months ago. Section 10 says, in very clear language, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and permit me to read Section 10.10 into the Hansard. Section 10 says, in the marginal note, duties and powers of the inspector. This was brought into effect by Act Number 3 of 2020. Section 10.10 says, where the provisions of this Act require anything to be done within a specified period of time, and the person who is required to comply with the time limit prescribed is unable to do so because of circumstances beyond his control, including but not limited to the occurrence of any hurricane, storm, fire, flood, or similar natural disaster or events such as industrial unrest, riot, public disorder, or the like, the inspector shall grant such extension of time as may be reasonably sufficient for the doing of the act or thing. Mr. Deputy Speaker, sitting as the chairman of the Legislative Review Committee, having had for the record the intervention of the Central Bank in terms of the attendance of the officers of the Central Bank and those with responsibility for insurance attend before the Legislative Review Committee, I can vouch with certainty that the Minister of Finance took great care and caution to recognize that Section 10.10 of the existing law works alongside the amendment that we're proposing now to Section 281, that the inspector of financial institutions had the ability to extend this, because it is a matter of record that the reason for the extension beyond 18 months to 1 year from now is specifically on account of the COVID-19 pandemic. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, that is all the much more important, because the member for Pointe-a-Pierre's submission is that foreign insurance companies somehow have an advantage over local insurance companies. But that is entirely untrue within the four corners of the law, because they are subject to the same provisions of supervision under the old law of regulatory inspection by the inspector of insurance companies, of the regulations promulgated under the old legislation, and of the obligation in the guidelines that are issued under this act to bring themselves into order. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I want to just stress that the allegation that there's a discrimination on the part of the law towards foreign companies having some superior advantage over local companies is not true. That is to be underwritten by the capital adequacy requirements set out in sections 20, 21, 22, 23, 24 of the Parent Act. That is the new legislation. For the purposes of reorganization, the foreign insurance companies must be registered under Part 3 of the new Insurance Act. There is a process by which that happens. The regulations, there are 10 regulations which have been issued and stand part of the law. They tell us the nature and quality of the assets which form the statutory backing behind which insurance companies must stand. They show us what the capital adequacy ratios are. They show us what the extent of foreign investment, shareholding investment, etc. is. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, it is important to note that there is an active and fulsome supervision in respect of the 4 companies, because there are 4 foreign companies that do business in Trinidad and Tobago, and all 4 are in the same bracket. I must add that there is also collateral supervision. And the collateral supervision is in the context of the beneficial ownership information that is known. It is also in the point of the fitness and propriety provisions, which the old Act still maintains. And therefore, that is no different from the fitness and propriety aspects that we're looking at. Mr. Deputy Speaker, it's also important to note that local companies, which are now 1 year into 18 years into the new legislation, they have a graduated approach to capital adequacy. It is not an automatic lift in capital adequacy that they have to have. The legislation sets out in section 24 of the new Act that you must take your capital adequacy up over a period of 5 years. That is whether it is general insurance business or long-term insurance business. So 18 months into the equation, it is unfortunate for the member for Pointe-a-Pierre to be attempting to say that somehow there is a wide gap between local and foreign companies. If you look, Mr. Deputy Speaker, at the capital adequacy requirements, and forgive me if I get this section correct now, it is section 22 of the Act. Section 22 of Chapter 8401, the new law, splits the capital adequacy between subsection 2, and that is 2A and 2B. And you don't get to $15 million until you're in the 5th year. In the first year, you're looking at $5 million. At the end of the second year, your capital adequacy has to go up to $8 million. And that is in respect of long-term business alone. For general insurance, your first year is $3 million in your minimum stated capital. Your second year is $6 million, and you don't get to $15 million until the 5th year. When you're looking to mixed business, and you see that in subsection 4, you start off at $6 million and you get to $22 million by the end of the 5th year. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, as a matter of law and as a matter of the record, I want to reject the submissions coming from the member for Pointe-a-Pierre, which suggests that there is a gap and discrimination between local companies and foreign companies. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I sat on every single Joint Select Committee in the period 2011 straight through to the last set of committees, all 4 of them. And I vividly recall the rationale for insisting in sections 281, the transitional provisions, the requirement for tie back to the earlier sections 21, where we made sure that foreign companies had to be registered under Part 3 as locally registered companies. Now, Mr. Deputy Speaker, it's important to note again, as a matter of law, that there are different types of companies permitted as local companies. You have companies with share capital. You have companies without share capital. You have companies limited by liability, companies limited by guarantee. You have companies issued under Part 5 of the local legislation, the Companies Act, which are companies that are externally registered companies. And therefore, there being a mix of companies, it is critical for us to remember that what is a local company simply means that you must be registered under the Companies Act. And therefore, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I submit again that the member for Pointe-a-Pierre's submission is to be rejected. Mr. Deputy Speaker, it's very important for us to remember that when we're looking at Section 81(2) and the obligation to reorganize from the commencement of the Act or such shorter period as the central bank directs, that this is what we're asking for is nothing beyond the normal contemplation where the central bank has a role and responsibility as the inspector of insurance companies does under Section 1010 of the Act. So to suggest that there is going to be an extension beyond a reasonable period of time, again, is to fail to recognize that the insurance companies, the foreign companies, are only going to have the benefit of any extension of time if the central bank asks for that, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, it's very important to also recognize when we're talking about the reason for the extension of time that we must look to Section 262 of the Act. That is the new insurance legislation, Chapter 8401. Section 262 is the section that sets out that you must have a vesting order. Now, why do I raise that? Again, in supporting the Minister of Finance in this, it is important to demonstrate the proportionality and the reason for this law. The vesting of the assets is critical. The vesting of the assets means that the capital and the risk management perspectives in Section 22 of the Parent Act can be met, because assets are required to be measured, if I could use that expression, by the central bank. So the central bank has said plainly that it requires an adequate extension of time to allow for the vesting orders to happen under Section 265(2) of this Act. It is under that a plan for reorganization is submitted, the assets are identified, and very importantly, so that we don't affect the costing of the insurance product, it is important for us to remember that it is at that point that the issue of stamp duty is avoided, because Section 265(2) says if you transfer the assets or you vest the assets there, you're going to do it with no stamp duty. Otherwise, there may be stamp duty applicable unless it is varied or removed. So as an important mechanism to preserve the pricing of the insurance product, Mr. Deputy Speaker, again I ask you to reject the submissions coming from the member for Pointe-a-Pierre and to allow the central bank, through the Minister of Finance, the correct opportunity to ensure that the stamp duty issue is dealt with by using Section 262 and Section 265 of Part 12 of the Insurance Act. In other words, don't raise the price by ensuring that you can't take advantage of the stamp duty exemption. That would drive the product price of insurance into a higher realm, and that would be disadvantageous to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I want to also remind that Section 26 of the Act deals with foreign companies, and that is of the new insurance legislation. When we look to Section 26, which is entitled under Act 8401, a foreign insurance company shall not, without the prior approval in writing of the central bank, establish, acquire, or open any representative office in Trinidad and Tobago, or without at least 5 business days' notice, close its business. And then it goes into how they apply for approval to establish, acquire, etc. So the formula set out in Section 26 is again important so that the central bank is given enough room to ensure the registration of foreign insurance companies mandated by Section 281 in the transitional provisions, but which mandates you to comply with Part 3 of the Insurance Act. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, if you put those submissions in the round, you must remember that there is no material disadvantage in light of the manner in which your capital adequacy must be measured under Section 22. The gap is not a wide gap as at 18 months. The reorganization process was contemplated clearly by Section 1010, where the inspector has a discretion to extend time for matters of serious import which would cause delay. COVID would be one of those matters. It's what you would normally call a force majeure clause. When you look to the supervision under the old Insurance Act, and you look to the preservation of the regulations which are in existence, you look to the preservation of the processes for transfer, etc., you will realize that foreign insurance companies are not being left to blow in the wind with any advantage. Now, Mr. Deputy Speaker, there's another point to address in point-of-pair submissions. This allegation that somehow there's some preference to the purchase of local insurance companies. Remember, for point-of-pair, referred to CLICO and referred to BAT portfolios. I want to again remind that any acquisition of an insurance portfolio is the subject of the central bank's consideration in the portfolio management by the inspector at the central bank with responsibility for insurance companies. So any attempt to insert some scandal, according to the member for point-of-pair, is to be rejected out of hand, because again, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that is to accept an attack, an open attack on the organization which is the Central Bank of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, and that is to be completely rejected, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the provision of 18 months ending in this month, June 30th, 2022, extending it by 1 year to June 2023, allowing for a further extension as the bill proposes, if the central bank requires it, because if you look at what is being requested, it is on the advice of the central bank that happens. That allows for the central bank to continue its role and function as the regulator wearing the hat of inspector. And that is something that we must properly support, Mr. Deputy Speaker, particularly when you have regard to the regulations, the 10 regulations which have been promulgated. The Central Bank Payment of Supervisory Fees Amendment Regulation, the Insurance Approved Securities Regulation 2020, the Issuance Capital Adequacy Regulation 2020, the Insurance Caribbean Policy Premium Method Regulation 2020, the Insurance Companies Registration Regulation 2020, the Insurance Financial Condition Report Regulations 2020, the Insurance Intermediaries Registration Regulations 2020, the Insurance Participating Account Regulations 2020, the Insurance Pension Fund Investment Regulations 2020, and the Insurance Pension Fund Plans Registration Fees Regulations 2020. These are integrally important in getting the transitional provision correct, because this must be done in an organized method. If the reality is that COVID came, if the reality is that the vesting orders require a fair opportunity for the central bank to ensure that it's done right, and so that the product price for insurance does not escalate. And if we're looking at the harmonization of the industry in a volatile environment post-COVID and with the war between Russia and Ukraine afoot, it is incumbent upon the Minister of Finance to act carefully and to accept the recommendations of the central bank. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, this is squarely proportionate law. It is very good law. It would be a dereliction of duty for the Minister of Finance to ignore the representations of the central bank properly put. The guidelines and recommendations are done with the recommendation coming from the central bank. Mr. Deputy Speaker, it is not, as Pointe-a-Pierre puts it in different words, a nilly-willy approach towards recommendations coming forward. It is far from that. If you look to clause 2 of the bill, and you look to clause 2 paragraphs A, B, and C, if you get to C, the minister, on the recommendation of the central bank, may by order subject to negative resolution extend the date. That extension of the order, which could easily have been done without negative resolution, but in this case is done with negative resolution, allows for a motion to negative to be filed in either house and in both houses within 42 days of delaying. And those are 42 working, I'm going to use that in quotations, days, because it's not 42 calendar days. It is correlative to the sittings of Parliament. And therefore, with the central bank's inclusion, the fact that the statutory instrument, which is the order, is under active scrutiny of the Parliament, means that there is supervisory and therefore proportionate consideration of the law. And therefore, again, clause 2, subparagraph C of the bill stands as a full rejection for the member from Pointe-a-Pierre's submission that this is somehow scantily clad legislation to benefit one company. That is not the case, and it is to be rejected. We do not conduct business the way my friends in the opposition are accustomed to. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I don't think that there's anything more to say in relation to the rationale for this legislation. I wish to support the Minister of Finance in fulsome measure for this law and to give birth and reality to the recommendations coming from no less an institution than the Central Bank of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. I thank you.
Chief Whip, I'll call on Chief Whip. I recognize the Member of Parliament for San Fernando East. You have 30 minutes, member.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I sat here this afternoon in a debate that I expected to be mundane. It's a simple matter. We pass these mundane amendments to ensure that there's stability within the local insurance industry. Lo and behold, I'm listening here to the member for Pointe-a-Pierre. And not only does he engage in blatant misinformation, but he also stoops to the level of race baiting, Mr. Deputy Speaker. During this discussion, he is comparing the treatment given out to international insurance companies to the Hindu Credit Union. What was the purpose of that? What does the Hindu Credit Union have to do
Deputy
with
Speaker,
this matter?
Standing Order 486, imputing improper motives.
I spoke the truth.
That's the name of the company.
Hindu Credit Union has nothing to do with this bill.
Members,
Naked race baiting.
members, please. Okay.
Deputy Speaker,
I'd like to.
48-6. The members said I was race baiting. I want them to withdraw it, please.
All right, again, member. I would have to uphold the standing order. I would like you to just retract the statement and again say
Deputy
differently,
Speaker, I
or you
withdraw.
can move on. One out of the two.
I withdraw. The member, instead of going through the details and trying to understand the rationale for this simple, mundane amendment, decided to engage on a level of distributing misinformation and also dog whistling, the likes of which I've rarely seen in this House. First of all, he invoked the specter of the Hindu Credit Union. And then he irresponsibly attempted to introduce instability in our local insurance industry by claiming that this government was somehow protecting international insurance companies. Mr. Deputy Speaker, in case the member from Pointe-a-Pierre didn't have that day in school, the more competition there is in the local insurance industry, the better rates and products the people of this country receive. It has nothing to do with protecting international insurance company. It's all about maintaining the stability within the industry so that the people of Trinidad and Tobago can receive the best service possible. And he came up with all sorts of amazing and fantastic reasons about why it is the international companies may not have been able to achieve the deadline that was designed in this bill. And let me speak more about that, Mr. Deputy Speaker. The reorganization must be executed by June 30th, 2022, within 18 months from the commencement of the Insurance Act, on January 1st of 2021. If you recall, Mr. Deputy Speaker, January 1, 2021, we were in the height of the COVID pandemic. The reorganization process is an extremely onerous and challenging one. And due to the many restrictions that were in place due to COVID, the international insurance companies could not meet the deadline. That's simple. Simple to understand. The member from Pointe-a-Pierre missed all of that. Decided to start talking about Hindu Credit Union in a debate that has nothing to do with them. And in fact, let me give the member a lesson exactly what is involved in the reorganization process, because clearly he needs one. There are 4 foreign insurers registered under the former Act that are required to reorganize their operations, and they all have initiated the activities to achieve this aim in broad terms. And now, he would also understand exactly why the names of these insurers would not be made public, because we don't want to create instability. We don't want to create a run on these companies. We want to maintain stability within the industry so that the people of Trinidad and Tobago can get the best service possible. But let me tell you about the reorganization process. A, the incorporation of a local company by the foreign insurer. B, the application to central bank for approval of the registration of a local company as an insurer. The central bank must ensure all the requirements for the registration of an insurer as laid out in sections 22, 24, and 28 of the Insurance Act, and properly meet prior to the insurance of the approval, which includes, inter alia, a fully constituted board of directors, the members of which must first meet fit and proper requirements. Evidence of requisite policies and procedures, sound business plan projections, and capital adequacy requirements controlling and significant shareholders, and, if applicable, acquirers which or who must meet fit and proper requirements, restructuring of group where entities are engaged in both financial and non-financial activities, permits of acquirers, significant shareholders and controlling shareholders, as applicable, which or who must meet fit and proper requirements. After being satisfied that all requirements for registration are met, the central bank is required to consult with the Minister of Finance prior to registration of the local company. Following this, the central bank will issue a certificate of registration.
Again, remember, it's a debate, so again,
Understood.
let's see how best we can work it out with regards to, making reference in notes.
Well, I wanted to list them out exactly, sir, so the member for Pointe-a-Pierre and Naprima can understand exactly what goes into the reorganization process. And has nothing to do with the Hindu Credit Union. I haven't even gotten through 5 of this list, only 2 so far. And you understand exactly what any company would have to go through to become in line with the reorganization process. We have 3. With the local insurer with own subsidiaries or ownership interest in entities, the approval of the central bank is required. Applications to the central bank for approval of a scheme of transfer to facilitate the transfer of all assets and liabilities. 5, transfer of all assets and liabilities of the foreign insurer to the newly registered local company. This may be done by way of vesting order issued by the Minister of Finance. And finally, the application for the Minister of Finance to issue the vesting order to transfer the business to the new company. Mr. Deputy Speaker, all of that had to be done within an 18-month period during the height of the COVID pandemic. It has nothing to do with preferential treatment for anyone. It has to do with this government doing the right thing to maintain stability within an industry that employs thousands of people in Trinidad and Tobago. So it's difficult to understand where the member was going with all of that misinformation and blatant, their go-to resource when things are difficult. If it is not about the HCU, then it's about Oreos or bananas or slave master names and so on. And that is simply distracting from the business of the people of this country.
Deputy Speaker, come on, 48.1. Where is that in the bill, in the 2 clauses? Come on. This gentleman is going on a slippery slope.
Okay.
Again, remember I've given you a certain leeway with regards to...
So I was going on the HCU slope.
Hold on, let me finish, my honourable member.
Sure.
Right, so again, let's be careful of our terms and the words that we want to use. So again,
sure.
tighten quickly.
I will not be much longer,
not,
Mr. Deputy Speaker. I will not be much longer.
Okay.
Again, even though the Insurance Act repeals the former Act, Section 28(1) of the Act saves provisions of the former Act until June 30th, 2022, under which the foreign insurers are registered, after which date their registration as insurers will be terminated. Terminated, which means after that date, they would not be allowed to operate in Trinidad and Tobago. What confusion would that cause in our local economy? This is a simple amendment designed to do the right thing so that international businesses can become in line with local laws and continue to operate, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Nothing more than that. As a consequence, if any foreign insurer is not reorganized by June 30th, 2022, the company will not be registered and authorized to conduct insurance business. Something that we cannot allow to happen. But I move on. Mr. Deputy Speaker, this allows the continued regulation of foreign insurers while they become compliant with the requirement to register under the Companies Act, Chapter 8101, and the new Insurance Act. This amendment will allow for the country to continue to obtain the financial contributions by the foreign insurers under the Insurance Act. In other words, we continue to receive taxes from these companies. And the amendments proposed, whilst also allowing foreign insurers or international insurers to continue getting their affairs in order. Because as I outlined, it is an onerous process and it was hampered by the COVID-19 pandemic. Getting their affairs in order to become more compliant with the requirements under the amended Insurance Act. Mr. Deputy Speaker, let me close by saying that as I came here today, I knew this was going to be, I expected, that it was going to be a mundane debate, to pass a mundane amendment to ensure the stability of an industry in this country that employs thousands of people, and it is a vibrant and competitive industry. Instead, we are meted with strategies, tired and tried and old strategies designed to divide our people. And that is something that I ask the members of the other side to stop. It's time to stop. The people of Trinidad and Tobago are tired of it. Every issue does not have to come down to race. And I thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
I recognize the Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I think the last speaker, member for San Fernando East, addressed several of the issues raised by the member for Pointe-a-Pierre. But I simply want to say that the member for Pointe-a-Pierre is trying to draw the government into a trap, because the honorable member knows that if this legislation is not passed, this will affect policyholders who have policies with foreign insurance companies. And if we were to accept the recommendation of the member for Pointe-a-Pierre and refuse to proceed with this bill and refuse to proceed with the extension of time, then thousands of insurance policyholders would be grievously affected and the sector would be plunged into chaos. We on this side will not be drawn into that trap. There are four foreign companies which I'm sure the member is well aware of. The companies are Massey United Insurance Limited, the Insurance Company of the West Indies Limited, Sagicor General Insurance Incorporated, and Sagicor Life Incorporated. And I want to repeat that when you take the combined number of policyholders of these four foreign insurance companies who are affected by this legislation, you're talking about thousands, many thousands of policyholders. None of these four have completed the reorganization. There are several reasons for this, but the most obvious one, Mr. Deputy Speaker, would be the effect of the COVID-19 pandemic. Members opposite may choose to live in some other world may choose to live in some other space, but in Trinidad and Tobago, like the rest of the world, we have been profoundly affected by the COVID-19 pandemic, the public health regulations that flowed from it, the various lockdowns and restrictions on activity that flowed from it. And I think it is obvious that under normal circumstances, the reorganization of these 4 foreign companies would have been completed by June the 30th, 2022. I think it's ridiculous for the member opposite to believe that COVID had no effect whatsoever on the reorganization process for these entities. The primary objective for the reorganization, or for the extension, let me correct that, the primary objective for the extension is to ensure that policyholders of the foreign companies, the 4, so this is not being done for 1, it is being done for all 4, are not negatively affected. The process is extremely involved, and the government and the regulator, both of us have to be very, very careful with respect to the formation of the local company to ensure that everything that is required to be done in the formation of the local company is done, particularly the whole question of fit and proper, the whole question of a vesting order to make sure that all assets and all liabilities are properly transferred to the local company. The time and effort involved in reorganization of the foreign companies is quite considerable. And I want to repeat, if COVID had not affected us as it affected the whole world, the reorganization would have been completed already. There are no issues in terms of the supervision of these companies because they have been kept registered under the old Act. That's a saving provision in the Insurance Act. When the foreign insurers are registered under the new Act, the new local companies must meet the transitional requirements of the new Act by the same deadline for other local insurers. Putting it simply, if we were to succumb to the entrapment attempted by the member for Pointe-à-Pierre, we would plunge the local insurance industry into chaos, we would disadvantage many thousands of persons, and we're talking about life insurance here, Mr. Deputy Speaker. What kind of person would be so cruel to cause so much pain to policyholders in Trinidad and Tobago by recommending to us that we should just simply forget about this and allow all of this commerce to occur? There is absolutely no merit whatsoever in the allegations and the insinuations of the member for Pointe-à-Pierre. It's just political mischief. That's what it is, political mischief. We on this side are not foolish. We know that if we were to fall for the bait within 24 hours, we would be condemned by the members opposite by allowing the local insurance industry to plunge into chaos. We are not falling for that. And with those few words, I beg to move.
Honourable members, the question is that a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Insurance Act 2018 be now read a second time. Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much. Mr. Deputy Speaker, in accordance with Standing Order 68-1, I beg to move that the Insurance Amendment Bill 2022...
1 second, Minister of Finance. Hold on. Honourable members, the question is that a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Insurance Act 2018 be now read a second time. Those in favour say aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it.
A bill entitled An Act to Amend the Insurance Act 2018.
Minister of Finance.
Thank you. Mr. Deputy Speaker, in accordance with Standing Order 68-1, I beg to move that the Insurance Amendment Bill 2022 be committed to the Committee of the Whole to be considered clause by clause.
Honorable members, the question is that the Insurance Amendment Bill 2022 be committed to the Committee of the Whole to be considered clause by clause. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? I think the ayes have it. This House will now go into the Committee of the Whole to consider the bill clause by clause. Thank you, members. Hi, welcome. Yes, honorable members, this Committee of the Whole committee is convened. Clear? Mr. Minister, Chief Whip, any amendments? No amendments?
No
Nothing
amendments.
before the chair?
No,
Lovely.
sir.
All right, so could we take the clauses all at once?
Yes,
Sure.
Chairman. Clauses 1 and 2.
The question is that clauses 1 and 2 stand part of the bill. The question is that clauses 1 and 2 now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Clauses 1 and 2 now stands part of the bill. Okay, this will now be reported to the House. So, thank you. Thanks for coming. This House now resumes. Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I wish to report that the Insurance Amendment Bill 2022 was considered in the Committee of the Whole and approved without amendments. I now beg to move that the House agree with the committee's report.
Honorable members, the question is that this House agree with the committee's report on the Insurance Amendment Bill 2022. All in favor say aye. Aye. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? I think the ayes have it. The Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I beg to move that a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Insurance Act 2018 be now read a third time and passed.
Honorable members, the question is a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Insurance Act 2018 be now read a third time and passed. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? I think the ayes have it.
A bill entitled An Act to Amend the Insurance Act 2018.
Leader of the House.
Thank you very kindly, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I beg to move that this House do now adjourn to Wednesday, the 22nd day of June at 1:30 p.m. Mr. Deputy Speaker, at that time we will do an act to amend the National Insurance Act, Chapter 3201.
Honorable members, On Thursday, June 16th, the nation commemorates Corpus Christi as a public holiday. Before I put the question on the adjournment of the House, I now invite members to express their Corpus Christi greetings. I'll call on the MP for Point-A-Pierre. My apologies. I'll now call on the MP for Diego Martin Central.
Thank you so much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I thought I had to go second today. Mr. Deputy Speaker, it gives me great pleasure to offer best wishes to the Christian community, and more so the Catholic and Anglican communities, on the occasion of the solemnity of Corpus Christi, the most holy body and blood of Jesus Christ. Thursday's celebration is significant, not only for the traditional emphasis on planting crops, but more so because it is the first time in 2 years that the Trinbago faithful will be able to have processions through the streets giving public witness to their faith. It is also timely that this national celebration of faith follows on from Sunday last, when the Church celebrated Trinity Sunday, the patron feast of this blessed land called Trinidad and Tobago. For Christians, Corpus Christi personalizes in a most phenomenal way the images of the broken body and spilled blood of Jesus Christ, shed in atonement for the sins of all of us, regardless of the state of our souls, and that he died for each and every one of us. But more so, it celebrates that we, though of many varied races, ethnicities, genders, political persuasions, all belong to the one body of Christ, and that he is always with us. There is a lesson there for all of Trinidad and Tobago, that all of us have been created equally, and that all of us are loved equally by this one body of Christ. Mr. Deputy Speaker, one of the great mystics of the Catholic Church, Saint Teresa of Avila, said that Christ has no body now on earth but yours, no hands, no feet but yours. Yours are the eyes with which Christ looks out his compassion to the world. Yours are the feet with which he is to go about doing good. Yours are the hands with which he is to bless us now. Perhaps a greater lesson to us all, Mr. Deputy Speaker and colleagues, is that if we truly began to treat each other like parts of the body of Christ, it would mean that we would have more respect for each other. If we saw each other as the hands and feet and the eyes of the body of Christ, that we would place greater value on each other's contributions and each other's worth. Corpus Christi is not just another public holiday. It is a call to healing and wholeness in the body of Christ. Mr. Deputy Speaker, with those words of reflection, I join with the members on the government side in extending greetings to the Christian community and the wider national community as we all celebrate Corpus Christi. Thank you.
I now call on the member for Point-A-Pierre.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. On behalf of the opposition members of Parliament, I'd like to wish the Roman Catholic community and other members of the Christian faith a blessed Corpus Christi 2022. The solemnity of the most holy body and blood of Christ, also known as the Feast of Corpus Christi, is a celebration of the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist. Corpus Christi is sacred to the Roman Catholic Church and Christian community because it is a reminder not only of Jesus' presence in our churches, hearts, and beliefs, but it is a cemented proof that God's love for humanity is persistent as well as never-ending. While Corpus Christi offers a message of the presence of Jesus in the Eucharist, it offers a greater message for our cosmopolitan society, regardless of our religious beliefs. That message is God, regardless of the name we refer to him, as is always present. As we observe Corpus Christi, it is a time for all of us to reflect on God's grace in our own lives. It is time to reflect that in troubling times, God is with us, giving us the strength to push on. It is time to reflect that in good times, God is with us, giving us the grace to help others in need. Corpus Christi is a time to focus on God's presence in our own lives and use His guidance to better our families, our communities, and our country. If as a nation we are to reflect the presence of God in our lives, then we must reflect kindness, respect, goodwill, and love to each other. On behalf of the opposition members, I'd like to wish you, Deputy Speaker, and the members of the government a happy, blessed Corpus Christi. Thank you.
Honorable members, I too would like to extend warm greetings to citizens of our nation on the occasion of the Feast of Corpus Christi. The Feast of Corpus Christi, observed by the Catholic faith, honors the body and blood of Jesus Christ and commemorates the Last Supper before his crucifixion. Corpus Christi not only recognizes the solemn sacrifice of Jesus Christ, but also serves as a reminder that he is here among us for eternity. This sacrifice is not only applicable to persons following the Catholic faith, but to all of us, regardless of our religious beliefs. Indeed, it is the hope that the tenets of Corpus Christi encourage us to uplift each other and our country. It is widely believed that anything planted on the Feast of Corpus Christi will thrive. As we observe this auspicious occasion, let us engage in our traditional planting. I therefore take this opportunity on behalf of the Parliament of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago to extend best wishes to our citizens on this holy and blessed feast of Corpus Christi 2022. Again, honorable members, on Sunday, June 19, 2022, our nation commemorates Labor Day as a public holiday. Before, again, I put the question before the adjournment, I will now invite members to express their Labor Day greetings. I will call on the member for Labrie.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to bring a few words with regards to Labor Day 2022. As we join the nation in celebrating Labor Day 2022, I wish to recognize and commend the Labor Union for their continued dedication towards championing the rights of workers across Trinidad and Tobago, while upholding the principles and tenets on which the movement has been founded. As a nation, we have learned that in order to make significant strides towards decent work, there must be a collective effort comprised of labor, business, and government representatives, the very basis of social dialogue and tripartism. It is important that we understand that we should not operate in silos and choose not to participate in dialogue because the conversations might be difficult. Instead, meaningful dialogue, which requires the engagement of all stakeholders participating in a frank and respectful conversations, essentially makes the most sense. I therefore urge the return of the labor representatives to the discussion table. According to the International Labour Organization, in order for social dialogue to take place, the following must exist: strong independent workers and employers organizations with the technical capacity and access to relevant information, political will and commitment to engage in social dialogue on the part of all parties, respect for the fundamental rights of freedom of association and collective bargaining, appropriate institutional support. As a government, we believe that all stakeholders have significant and vital contributions to make in offering a solution-oriented approach to treat with the challenges within the labor sector. The government continues to facilitate labor administration and the formulation of policy and legislation as part of that mandate. As such, the government has embarked upon a comprehensive review of several existing legislative items, including but not limited to the Cipriani College of Labor and Corporate Studies Act, the Industrial Relations Act, the Retrenchment and Severance Benefit Act, just to name a few. The government continues to actively refine proposed changes to these pieces of legislation, and the fruit of this shall soon be evident. While the government maintains a peaceful industrial landscape through conciliation, education, and training, health and safety of workers remain a top priority. The recent tragic incidents in the workplace have greatly underscored the seriousness with which we must approach the management of our health and safety. In order for us to build safe places of work in Trinidad and Tobago, we must do so in unison. And we must do so now by ensuring compliance with the regulations governing these workplace safety and health issues. Through amended legislation and with sufficiently staffed occupational safety and health agencies, citizens can look forward to a safer and healthier workplace. In an effort to foster the practice of working together as a nation, I wish to reiterate to Labour representatives that returning to the table would be a significant step in the right direction so that as a collective we can engage in fruitful discourse in the spirit of tripartism to the ultimate benefit of the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. In order to uphold the principles of decent work, industrial peace, and opportunity for all, we need to preserve unison. We need to stand together, and through these times, as we reposition Trinidad and Tobago at the forefront of sustainable economic growth and development. It is one thing that COVID-19 pandemic has taught us, and that is we can overcome our challenges by coming together as one people, and that we are stronger together than we are when we are divided. I wish Trinidad and Tobago a happy Labor Day 2022, God's richest blessings, and their continued support in the development of Trinidad and Tobago. I thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
I now call on the member for Couva South.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. This coming Sunday, the 19th of June 2022, Trinidad and Tobago will celebrate the 85th anniversary of the formal recognition of the modern-day trade union movement. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the labor riots of 1937 provided workers with the opportunity to engage in freedom of association, what we were termed to join a trade union of his or her choice, the right to strike and engage in collective bargaining and pursue a decent work agenda. That glorious year of 1937 saw the formation of the All Trinidad Sugar Estates and Factories Workers Trade Union and the Oilfield Workers Trade Union under the leadership of Krishna Devanarayan, also known as Adrian Kola-Rienzi, and Tubal Rira Buzz Butler. As we reflect on the last 85 years of struggle, I am forced to ask the real question to the leadership and rank and file of the labor movement of Trinidad and Tobago. Given the state of industrial relations and collective bargaining, what would have been the position of those who would have gone to the great beyond, such as Adrian Colarienzi, Tubal Rivera Buzz Butler, Bade Sagan Maraj, Captain Arthur Andrew Cipriani, Vernon Glean, Carl Tull, Joe Young, Selwyn John, George Reeks, Francis Mangro, Kenrick Rennie, Nuevo Diaz, Boise Moore Jones, Elma Francois, Clotilde Walcott, and Sahidan Ramrup. Surely the conclusion would have been that we seem to have regressed back to the socio-economic conditions that would have prevailed during the 1930s. In fact, many would conclude that this Labor Day will be not one of celebration and privilege, but one that would be one of labor pains. The gloominess of the sky outdoor is symbolic of the economy and the overall industrial relations environment. Today I want to appeal to the families of the over 130,000 persons who would have lost their jobs, workers who are working on 2022 who are working on 2014 salaries, and workers who would have died as a result of health and safety standards being compromised in the workplace and who do not have or no longer have group health plans and pension plans, to realize that all is not lost. There is hope, but that must be characterized through the recreation and focus of unity and an atmosphere that demands a strong sense of leadership. And as I said, unity not only at the leadership level, but at the rank and file level of the labor movement. The time to organize, mobilize, and defend the gains of the glorious struggles of the 1930s is now. There can be no compromise on the pursuit of a decent work agenda in furtherance of the nation building in relation to what the labor movement would have stood for. The labor movement has been a cornerstone and a pillar in terms of the growth and development of Trinidad and Tobago. And as we go beyond 2022, we must ensure as a collective society that the focus and ideals of the labor movement is not placed on the background or in the background, because we would be hypocritical in the platitudes and the praise that we heap on the founding fathers of the labor movement. I thank you.
Honorable members, I too would like to extend my greetings on the occasion of Labor Day. Labor Day in Trinidad and Tobago was declared an annual national holiday in 1973. It is also the anniversary of the Butler oilfield riots, which took place in 1937. During that era, ongoing tensions between workers and employers in many sectors of the society, including the sugar plantations and oil fields, were witnessed. Those tensions manifested in instances of unjust working conditions, underemployment, low wages, racism, economic depression, and a decrease in the standard of living of the working class. The social unrest gave rise to several memorable leaders, such as Captain Arthur Andrew Cipriani, Adrian Colarienzi, Elma Francois, George Weeks, Albert Maria Gomes, CLR James, and Tubal Uriah Buzz Butler, who ushered in an era of stability and by extension, peace of mind to the working class citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. Honorable members, as we still grapple with the after effects of COVID-19 on this economy, let us acknowledge the trials endured by the labor movement. Their determination should serve as a reminder for us to stand for what is right and just in society and to always persevere. I therefore take this opportunity on behalf of the Parliament of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago to wish all citizens a peaceful and enjoyable Labor Day 2022. Honorable members, the question is that this House do now adjourn to Wednesday, 22nd June 2022 at 1:30 p.m. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? I think the ayes have it. This House now stands adjourned to Wednesday, 22nd June 2022 at 1:30 p.m.